So yeah, I'm Jay Millar. I'm the what am I? I'm the director of marketing for United Record Pressing here in Nashville. Been there about 8 years. I'm going to go through a little bit about me, a little bit about the company, the history of the company, talk about how records are made, maybe some thoughts on the trends of the things. Just basically I put together a whole bunch of slides, figured about how long those slides would take, and tried to add this up to about 20 minutes. So let's see how that goes. I feel like I'm in a band. You know, in addition, again, I'm going to speak a little bit about me. I'm a local guy. I live here in East Nashville. I've got a lot of hobbies. I do some art stuff here in town. You know, at East Nashville, you can usually see the refrigerator doors that I do there. I spray paint and stencil over refrigerator doors. And actually, that one came out of United Record Pressing. Later, when we get to all the stuff that's upstairs in the historical stuff at United, I'll tell you about where that came from. But yeah, one of my hobbies is spray painting and painting refrigerator doors and old things. And because I am local, you can usually find me doing it. If you're here locally too and live near Shelby Park and you're ever cutting through and you see the weird little shack with the black flag windows, like the 4 bars, that's where I'm in there smelling too many paint fumes, painting these things. And another hobby I do is I've got a little sort of hobby label called Microfiche Records, where I've done a lot of reissues, basically just stuff my wife and I love. Basically it was stuff that was only available on CD at the time that we'd license and put it out on vinyl just because we kind of thought at the time no one else would, and we wanted it in our collections. We like to say we were filling the holes in our collection, or as opposed to a reissue label, we're like a label with issues because they've never been issued on vinyl before. There was Outrageous Cherry, a band from Detroit I grew up loving, Clem Snide, Eve Barzilay, who's a wonderful local guy here too, making sure that was up there. Brunettes, another Clem Snide record, Deep Sea Arcade band from Australia. And then as all these kind of hobbies started coming together and started doing things with a lot of friends, we created what we now call the plural of vinyl, which is just my friends and I, and my wife, some of which are in the room. And so we sell t-shirts and stickers, and I actually brought a pile of stickers if anyone wants them too. But so now anything we do, we now do under that umbrella, and including my buddy Cameron, who cuts grooves for records. I'll go into detail about that when I get into that stuff. But he helped with these amazing things that I'm really proud of, that were the first original stuff we did through Microfiche or through Plural of Vinyl. We did a couple of Record Store Day games. They were the first turntable games to exist probably since the 70s, and we believe they're the first games that require multiple drops. So like in the case of this football game, it's a 7-inch record with, what do we have, 5 grooves on each side. And that's right, because we call it decagonophonic, 10 sides. So depending where you drop the needle, you'd get a first down, a touchdown, an interception, etc. And there was a scorecard, and you'd hear the audio, and it'd tell you when to flip sides and blah, blah, blah. And that led to this most recent year where we did RPM Turntable Baseball, which had similar, like, this one had 13 grooves on it. So there was like, you could get a base hit, a strike, and out, etc. There was a separate groove where you had a 1 in 3 chance of stealing a base, and then the other side was a parody of kind of the games they did in the 50s when they used to do the turntable games. They used to be like horse racing games where there were LPs with with 9 grooves, and depending where you drop the needle, a different horse would win. So since we were going with the baseball, we did what we called the concession stand challenge, where it was basically a parody of the mascot races around the bases like that. And then we created, we got bit by the game bug, so we created Cleveland Steamer, the game. I'm not sure why that's funny, but Detroit Street Taco. So it's basically loosely kind of stolen from Cards Against Humanity, but also stolen from, basically my wife just randomly said once, why isn't there Urban Dictionary, the game? And we're like, oh, there should be. So we kind of created it. And we're in the process of just kind of launching that now. We're about to shoot the commercial and such. We also made a local Nashville edition too, which is a limited edition to only 100 and kind of fun. My favorite combo in there is probably Lower Broadway Yoga Mat, which can have really good definitions. So again, I'm at United Record Pressing. Company's been around since 1949 and been in the same building since 1962. You can see when they first opened, they were called Southern Plastics. They changed the name to United in the 70s. It was actually created sort of from the ashes of Bullet Records and Bullet Plastics. I should get these two closer together. But Bullet Records was one of the first labels, or some say the first label in Nashville. And they had created Bullet Plastics, basically they were not trusting, other plants to make their stuff. So the guy, I forget his first name, but the last name was Bullet, created Bullet Plastics. And that existed for only a couple years, and then they were kind of losing interest, so a couple of the main people running that plant went off in 1949 and started Southern Plastics. And they, 1949 coincidentally was also the birth year of the 45 RPM record. So really, United, then Southern Plastics, has been making 45s or 7-inch records for as long as they've been around. They moved into the current location in 1962. There's been a lot of historic stuff done there and a lot of key things pressed there, including the first Beatles 7-inch in America was pressed there back when they were on VJ prior to signing to Capitol. A lot of the old Sun, Stax stuff, Motown stuff was pressed there. And initially when they started, they were just doing 7-inch records. There was a separate facility down the street, sort of between us and Grimey's, called Dixie Record Pressing. We've just got some of their machinery and stuff, but that all got brought in and put under one roof. So, then we were just doing 7-inch records. Now we're doing 7-inch, 10-inch, 12-inch, even done odd things like 13-inch records and 8-inch records. If you didn't hear about that, it's kind of fun too, because it's a Jack White thing that they made for South by Southwest in Texas, because everything's bigger in Texas. They wanted all their 7 inches to be 8 inches just for sale in Texas, which is pretty awesome. So now that everything's under one roof, we are currently the largest manufacturer of vinyl records in the country. And all under one roof, doing the, all the records with, we're running 24 hours a day, 6 days a week, manufacturing about 30 to 40,000 records a day, which coincidentally represents about 30 to 40% of the vinyl that's out there in the US. And they're actually expanding as well, as they're a few weeks away from opening a second location off Nolensville Road, so they'll have 18 additional presses to add to the 28 that are currently running. So it's big and growing. But going into some of the historical stuff, one of the most fascinating things about the plant is the upstairs. There's, like this here's the party room. There's it's kind of always existed as that. Some of the furniture is original to the room. It's hosted lots of events, including a signing party for then 16-year-old Hank Williams Jr. I'm not sure if that's when he was 16. It just had that joyous, childish jubilance about it that I figured it might have been. There has also been events for the Cowsills, the Supremes, also very jubilant, Smokey Robinson, and Wayne Newton, also at 16 years of age. And there were probably more, actually I know there were more, but they didn't do a good job of keeping track of things. There wasn't like a logbook of who had events there. When they were doing these things, they didn't get the cultural significance of what they were doing, especially with what I'm kind of building up to. So they, and really the company is guilty of it now too, as we've done events for like Kelly Pickler, Eric Church, a lot of more modern things. It's rented out a lot for photo shoots, even film shoots. There was that Identical film, which was loosely Elvis-based, that was shot here. I say loosely Elvis-based because they didn't want to pay for the name Elvis, because Drexel was close enough, so they just go with that. But you know, one of the cooler recent ones, or somewhat recent in the last few years, there was the album that Jack White did with Wanda Jackson. And if you've seen that video for Thunder on the Mountaintop, her Bob Dylan cover, the entire video was shot in that party room. You can see the checkered floor and the fabulous wood paneling. So the only shot in that video that was not shot in that room was shot just outside that room in the hallway, where the opening scene is Jack White's feet walking, because he walks like that, down the checkerboard hall, and then everything else is shot there. They do tours, and it's a really, everybody, if you haven't, should go and do a tour. They do them Fridays. Then there's also a big soundboard in the corner of the room that belongs to another amazing local institution, Welcome to 1979, which also tour. Coincidentally used to be a pressing plant too, and used to be a cassette manufacturing plant. It actually has some awesome Wanda Jackson history as well. Is they when they occupied this place, they were cleaning out the attic and found all these headshots from things, and one was from a Wanda Jackson children's record where she had like a big Bob Ross afro, and it's amazing, and they've got it hung up. It's worth just for that to go see Welcome to 1979. But Welcome to 1979 is, as I said, based in an old vinyl pressing plant and cassette manufacturing plant. And they're currently, they're a analog recording studio. They rebuild vintage gear. They've got a side company called Mara Machines, where they rebuild the tape machines, and then they also do the cutting of the lacquers, which, if you don't know what that means, we'll get to that too, which is essentially just that very first step in the vinyl production process. But we partnered with them on a series that we call Upstairs at United, and basically we use that soundboard and those, they bring in a couple of those Mara machines, tape machines, and we do live direct-to-tape recordings in that room. Live in a sense that, you know, everybody's playing at once and everything's done in one take, but we don't have there's not enough space for an audience and such, but they all come in the same themed jackets, and we just change up the inserts. Normally you'd see, you know, the record label showing through the hole, but some of the photos are fun like that too. The back shows, you know, again, Southern Plastics, or, you know, when United opened in that building in '62, a little history about United, a little history about Welcome to 1979. So in that room, and these are available, you know, everywhere. They're definitely available, you know, here locally, Grimey's Groove, Fond Object, etc. But we've done live recordings with Brendan Benson, Corey Chisel, Jeff the Brotherhood. Go back. I thought they were in order. Keen, North Mississippi All-Stars. I may have skipped the Smoke Fairies photo, but they should have been in there too. Chuck Mead, Henry Wagons, Willie Mason, The Cults, and probably my favorite, I mean, they're all good, but Bobby Rush. And then part of why we created this series, it was twofold. Part of it, we kind of romanticized the idea of the ambient noise. Like, these are all recorded above the pressing plant, so there's loud clinking and clanking and hissing and all this industrial noise sort of seeping through the floor. And we kind of romanticized the fact of recording somebody's record with that, you know, the sound of other people's records being manufactured coming through. We failed at that. You can't hear it at all, but we really embraced that idea and thought it would be cool, so that was part of it. But then the bigger part was we wanted to pay homage to the history of that space and what's immediately adjacent to that space, which is what we call the Motown Suite. So when you know, United, then Southern Plastics, when they had that building built, which by the way is on Chestnut Street over by Greer Stadium, which the Sounds used to play at. It'll probably be a Walmart or something soon, or condos. But when they started in that building, their two biggest clients were Motown and VJ, who had predominantly black artists and black executives. And at that point in time, there were few, if any, hotels that would accept those individuals due to the color of their skin. So they created what we now call the Motown Suite, so they'd have a place to stay when they'd come to town. Much like the party room, there wasn't like a logbook of exactly who stayed there, because they didn't get the significance of it. It was, to them, it was just doing business. We've got these customers that don't have a place to stay, let's give them a place to stay. So a lot of them, it's a little tough to prove some of them. One of my favorites that they have proved is that Berry Gordy, founder of Motown and Supremes fan, definitely stayed there on multiple occasions. And one of the interesting facts about it too, at least as legend goes, the reason that he came all the way to Nashville from Detroit too, to press his records is this was the only plant, or United was the only plant that would extend him a line of credit. So you could make the leap that without United, Motown might not have existed. It's hard to say whether or not they would have found funding to get it off the ground, which is just staggering to me. So when you walk into the Motown Suite, there's sort of a living room area, which unfortunately is really bad, like sort of museum type things I've been one by one taking down. But because everything else feels like you're walking back in time, but it's a lot of the original furniture. I'm sure you all saw the film Identical. This was Drexel's childhood home. So yeah, so just another view of the living room area. And that on the side is a great turntable too. It's a portable turntable. It's about 200 pounds. And the speakers open from the sides and the actual turntable flips down. It's pretty cool. They peed back then. So there was a bathroom. Of course, there was the bedroom. There's the smoke fairies, found them. So two single beds, because that's how they did it back then, as evidenced by the Flintstones and I Love Lucy and such. But a side thing people like to talk about, not really fully in the photo, that black blob in the corner is the heel of a shoe, is the company's changed hands a handful of times, and at one point an incoming purchaser of the company saw the shoes there. This was like 30 or more years ago. And liked the mystique, thinking, you know, maybe they're Smokey Robinson shoes, but maybe they're the janitor's shoes. But either way, we've left there for the mystique of that, which is kind of fun. And then there's a beautiful kitchen as well, with the original dinette set. And there's an old pull-down lamp, and I like to call it the cat killer stove. It's like a push-button stove. I can picture my cats walking on the buttons, and But it's a really cool, like, walking back in time. This is all part of the tour too, should someone get inspired to the tour. They also make records. Gonna obviously walk you through that part. I don't know whose records those are. I don't own any Boston records. I just found this online. Sinatra, though. The very first step in the process is the lacquer, which I mentioned. There's Welcome to 1979 here in town, who cuts them locally. There's also a company called Nashville Record Productions, who's located essentially in United's parking lot. So most of what we do gets brokered to one of those two companies, and some people have their own done and sent to us as well. But the lacquer is essentially the very first step in the process where your music is in phonographic form. And a lot of people have trouble, myself for a while too, had trouble just even figuring out how a record works. And to me, the easiest way to understand that technology, the thing that finally nailed it home for me, was the wax cylinder, which was really the first phonographic recording, but as opposed to being the non-compact disc, they're, were shaped sort of like a soda can, and the groove kind of goes around the circumference. So it turns like this, and there's a needle that rides along it. And like a old gramophone, there's no electricity to, to play them or even to record them. So in recording to them, the artists would do like you're seeing there. They would just force as much music. I don't know if she's sticking her head in there or what, but they'd try and project as much as they can into the cone, and that cone is, the air that she's forcing in there is causing a vibration in a little needle that's at the end of that cone. And that soda can shaped wax cylinder is spinning and moving side to side, or left to right, and it's essentially cutting the shape of those sound waves into it. And then my friend John, who's here, would know better, but there's a way, I don't know if you turn it around, there's something then that you just switch it to playback, and without any electricity, it just plays. It's just, those grooves are representing sort of the shape of the vibrations in the air, so spinning it again is causing those vibrations, which get amplified by the cone, again, same thing as like with an old gramophone, and recreates the sound. The interesting fact with it too is that, at least as I've read, when they first discovered that technology existed, it was actually done into a piece of paper where they knew that they could, take sound and kind of capture the shape of those waves, but they thought they were just drawing it onto a sheet of paper so that they could look at it almost like it was writing out the music or drawing the notes. And it was accidentally that they discovered that they were actually able to reproduce the music from there, which is, as I can read, how they discovered phonographic sound. But these days, we actually use electricity. This is from Welcome to 1979, so they're still doing that same basic technology where they're really just cutting the the shape of the music into the lacquer, which again, I showed you the lacquer, the big black disc, and it's called that because it's an aluminum disc that's coated in lacquer, which I guess it's about the same material as nail polish, so kind of hard but kind of soft. So you can cut a lot of detail into there, and they're cut at real time, and he can feed, I say he because he's in the room, my friend Cameron, but he can take whatever you send to it, so it could be CD, could be laptop, could be analog tape, could be microphone. They actually can do direct-to-disc recordings where they have bands set up and play, and I know Third Man does that as well. But so basically, yeah, they're cutting the groove in real time, so it's spinning on this platter here in real time, so 45, 33, 78, etc., and cut into one side. Then they bring the lacquers over to United. We have a electroplating facility on site. I'm probably going long, so I'm going to speed this up. But they electroplate it. So essentially, they're spraying it with a very thin coating of silver. It's the same process as like electroplating for handlebars, car bumper, things of that nature. So it gets sprayed with that thin coating of silver, and then once it's coated in the silver, they lower it into the nickel bath. Not nickel back, but nickel bath. It's very different. It's a nickel chloride solution, which is sort of like a liquid nickel. And then in those two bins are 100% raw nickel nuggets. And what's happening is it's electroplating. So there's a electrical charge being sent to that silver-plated disc that's spinning in there. And the nickel inherently carries the opposite charge, so the two are attracted. So as it spins in there for about 2 hours, when they pull it out, they've made an inverse copy of those metal parts. They can separate them to have an inverse copy. Side note, like if you see the little swirl there, that's what the thing is on the Jamie Johnson album cover, is that was taken at United. You can see at the very top of it, you can see the spindle going into the liquid, but that's from our plating thing. That's actually him on the right. So they make different generations. The order side essentially determines how many generations they make to press the records, and then once they've gotten to the proper generation, they form them, as you can kind of tell. They have contours at the edge, and the hole is perfected, just everything so that it'll work and fit into our presses. The vinyl we get in pellet form. It's PVC, polyvinyl chloride. That's obviously our black vinyl. It's a virgin vinyl, you can tell, because it's a perfectly shaped pellet. It's a machined pellet. If it were regrind, the reused vinyl, they would be jagged shards. And we do get the vinyl in a lot of different colors as well. We can mix and match them to people's specifications, do what we can to try and get a perfect color. But those vinyl pellets are heated to about 250 degrees and squeezed like a tube of toothpaste into that metal sort of cup off to your left there. And when that cup lifts up, once it's filled, it exposes what we call the biscuit, which is essentially just a hot blob of the vinyl. And it's actually then that the labels get applied. So there's no adhesive holding the label onto the vinyl. It's just that the vinyl's that hot that it sticks to it. So you have the biscuit with the labels above and below. And that's right, I'm going into the labels. So the labels, we don't actually print the labels in-house. We used to and will again soon in the new building. But they come over in big uncut sheets, so we're just chopping them into sort of manageable sizes. Then they take them about 200 at a time in a stack, and just manually with a visual aid and a little metal die, they die cut them about 200 at a time down to the circles. And then from there, they take the circles, and there's just a really old school drill press with a foot pedal, and drill the center holes, which creates a beautiful confetti and puts the center hole into the record. And then from there, they take them and they tie them up into little bundles. Yeah, I love that record. It's not out yet, soon. So they get tied up into little bundles where they get baked. We have ovens, in this case a pretty awesome one that's converted from an old refrigerator, obviously, where the labels have to be baked minimum overnight just to make sure that there's no moisture in the labels. If you've ever had a record where the label is kind of bubbled, it's really two labels there. The machine, as you can see, that it was grabbing the labels, it grabs it with suction, and it can mistakenly grab two, and then when it's pressed, you don't really notice it, but over time it starts to bubble up. That can happen, or if there's moisture, it can stick to the plate and just kind of look nasty. But in either case, we bake them to make sure that doesn't happen. But so the biscuit with the label above and below gets brought between the set of stampers, and those stampers come together slowly, but with, I believe it's 2,000 tons of pressure, which forces the excess vinyl out between the stampers, not unlike a Play-Doh fun factory. So it's the same basic thing if you see, it's stamping it and sometimes a little too much comes out and that's got to be trimmed. So when it comes out, that untrimmed record goes forward. You can see right up at the edge there's the blade, and that'll come down. That record comes forward. You can actually see the next biscuit coming in behind too with the label below. But so that gets grabbed by a set of trim pads, which spin it as that blade comes down, and you can see the excess starting to come off down the side there. The trimmings, there's a trimmer from a different model of press. And actually, if it were a 7-inch record, at this point is when they punch the center holes. So other sort of little known fact is that every record starts as small hole, and then if it's chosen at this part, it gets punched at the end to be large hole. Large hole used to be an indicator that the record was cut at 45, which was proprietary to RCA. Small hole meant cut at 33, proprietary to Columbia. It was like VHS beta stuff until somebody figured out, you just make a little circle and it's an adapter, and they started making, you literally had to buy 2 different turntables. But now obviously they make the adapters and turntables with switches. But so once they're pressed and trimmed, they get stacked up under the spindles where the inspectors will come up and grab that stack of records and visually inspect them one by one, just making sure the labels are on the correct sides, there's no defects. There's a lot of little things that they kind of learn to look for that are even audio defects that they can pick out visually. And then there's listening posts in the corners of most of the rooms too, where they can, of course, listen to the records too, just to make sure that, that they're sounding as good as they should. And then those trimmings get collected along with any of the rejected records, because there's a machine that's almost like a big hole punch that they put the records in and it blows out the center, and anything that does not have paper on it can be reground and reused along with any of those trimmings. And the trimmings from the colored vinyl, like that one, they just mix all of the color together, and it's marketed as what we call randomly mixed color vinyl. And it's typically sold cheaper than black because it's basically all recycled vinyl. But you get some of the most beautiful records, but you have no control of what color you're actually getting. But they're pretty much all kind of marble, kind of bowling ball meets tie-dye kind of look. And then, if people want specific mixes, we can certainly do those as well. But the machines are constantly stirring things, so that's one of our favorite things to do, is just light hints of other colors, because it's constantly, everyone's going to look different. One of the cooler things that we do is the split color records, which back in the day was well, up until a couple of years ago, for us was a very manual process, and still is for the other plants, where we saw that biscuit, they would have to run 2 separate presses, each making, in this case, like a black record and a white record, take those biscuits out of the press, manually cut them in half, put those parts back together, and put it back in the press for every single record, which is still how we do like the tricolor records, which we do for Third Man. But so those were kind of a off-the-menu thing for a while because it was so labor-intensive. And then Third Man wanted a large number of Dead Weather records when their first album came out that were split color. So rather than try and cut all those manually and do that all by hand, we fabricated what we believe to be still the only automated press that can take from 2 color sources to create a split color record. One thing we don't do, but since I'm just kind of telling you about records, is picture discs, which is a similar process, but a different process. It's one of those things that we proved that we could do, but we also proved kind of that we didn't want to do because it was too labor intensive. Hot Topic kids love Lion King, by the way. But the picture disc, the easiest analogy of how a picture disc works is to think of a sandwich. But instead of, like with a typical sandwich, you've got the fried chicken on top, the fried chicken on the bottom, the meat, the cheese, and such in between. With a picture disc record, like if you picture a normal record as a sandwich, you've got the vinyl or that biscuit, could be buttermilk biscuit if it was KFC, I guess, with the labels above and below. With a Pac-Man picture disc record, it's still, there's vinyl in the center, and then there's still the labels, but as opposed to being, 3.5-inch labels, the labels are the full 12 inches. So that's really just a sheet of paper, but then there's clear plexiglass on each part. So those are done by hand too, similar to like the 12-inch or the split color, where they're putting the biscuit back in. So there's a press where it's separated on its own. They'll put a clear sheet of plastic on the bottom, clear sheet of plastic on top, because the metal parts are top and bottom where they come together like a waffle iron. Should have did that picture too. And then they put the giant labels top and bottom, and then they put that biscuit in, and it all presses it together. So really what you're hearing, because some people say picture disc doesn't sound that great. It actually sounds better than it used to. I've got some that sound great, but it's because you're really hearing more like plastic, like cellophane than you are the vinyl. The vinyl's in there, but the vinyl's in there just kind of keeping it together. So it's plastic, paper, vinyl, paper, plastic. It's like recycling. And it's a similar process that they use in doing some of the weird stuff like this. We didn't do this one, but it's a cool one, where they had the yarn in it. And similarly, it's the biscuit, the yarn, and they put clear plastic on top of it so that otherwise there'd be no way to make sure when your needle's going through those areas that it's not hitting the fibers of the yarn. And with a lot of the picture discs too, they have some separate trimmers, some of which are just like, kerchunk, like big, come together and cut it down to the circles, as opposed to ours, which had the trimmers. And that's the process they, because we don't do this either, but they use to make the shaped records. So this one you can kind of see it in the corner. It's actually just a 7-inch record on there, even though it's about 10 or 12-inch in the part, but they're making full-size 12-inch records and then making a separate die that just punches it down to the shape. One of the unique things that we're proud of that we did do is the liquid-filled record, which is kind of awesome and kind of a disaster at the same time. But because they were kind of craft work things, it's almost like a couple of records just sort of glued together to keep the liquid inside. And I say they're kind of a disaster because even with the sticker Third Man put on them, they only offered them at their store here in town. And the sticker basically said, like, you're on your own once you leave the parking lot. Like, we can't guarantee this isn't gonna leak, this isn't gonna evaporate, this isn't like, have fun. But yeah, they're pretty awesome. So when it spins, you can see it splashing around and such. And I'm curious to see this next one because I broke the rules about how big of a file I could give. This one's tiny. Okay, it's not too bad. It still looks gruesome. So this one is a bit of craziness. This is one that sort of United didn't do, but together we did. I helped make this happen. When press started getting out about the liquid-filled records, Wayne Coyne from the Flaming Lips already had it in his head that he wanted to do blood-filled records. And he asked the CEO of the company, and he's like, yeah, sure, blah, blah, blah. And, Wayne calls me and comes to get a tour of the plant, takes this picture of me, which I'll tell you about in a moment. he's telling me about this, and I'm like, yeah, that's cool, yeah, we can, sure, you know, and I mention it again to the CEO, and he's like, I thought he was joking, and it's like, no, if Wayne Coyne says something weird, he's being totally serious, which includes this. As I was walking around showing Wayne the plant, he stops and he sees this you know, stain on the floor, and he's like, can I take your picture? I'm like, yeah, you're Wayne Coyne, you can, you know, what do you want me to do? He's like, lay on that stain. And it's like, okay. And I guess one of his fun things is he likes putting it through a filter that makes it look like blood. And it's like, yeah, look, that's what I look like dead. But so basically I was told I had to reach out to Wayne Coyne and say, yeah, you know the thing we said we could do for you? Can't do it. And so I wanted to help him through it. And I tried to find this happy medium, and vinyl's a happy medium, actually. I kind of convinced my boss. I was like, well, these kind of have to be created as pockets anyway, and then we fill them with the liquid. Let's just give him kits, and he can do this on his own, and that way everybody's happy, and you know, the kids can have their blood. And I tell Wayne this, and I'm like, you know, he's like, well, I still want to do it in Nashville, and I want to do it here. And I'm like, well, you know, I'm sure there's Grimey's, there's, you know, I don't know, Blackbird Studios, there's somebody here cool who probably would be fine with you doing it there. And he interrupts me, he goes, your kitchen. I got the coolest text I ever got, which was Wayne Coyne saying, Jay, I need your, he speaks like that in text, a lot of pauses. I need your address. Edward Sharp and the Magnetic Zeros are FedExing their blood to your house. So at this time, Wayne was putting out a record that had a lot of guests on it. There was Edward Sharp and the Magnetic Zeros, Kesha, Yoko Ono, Chris Martin from Coldplay, a whole bunch of people, just like all-star kind of record. And all their blood was in my house. So he collected the blood from these people, a lot of which he was telling me of, like some people that were harder to get it from, and sending nurses to their houses, to the shows, which is awesome. Like, I hope they're in the little white outfits and everything, but so anyway, he shows up at the house with these vials of blood and mixing them. If you're all invited to come over, we still have those bowls in our kitchen. But he mixed all that blood in the bowls and kind of mixed it up with a decoagulant, which didn't work very well. I was going to show you the photo of what they look like now. Not as pretty. But so it is, he made about, they're double LPs, so he made, it was, I think, like 12 or 13 sets of them that were sort of auctioned off, I think, or not auctioned off, but they went to charity for about $2,500 a piece. But it was just kind of a fun, crazy story I wanted to throw in there as well. But they deny that they did it, but it's far enough away that I don't think anyone's going to die from those toxic records. But you know, yeah, so that's sort of United Record Pressing. Again, I mentioned I've been the director of marketing for the past 8 years. I think you should visit there. It's a wonderful place. Should you go and visit, I might not be there because I actually put in my notice. And I'm about to start working at Sundazed Music, a great reissue label, so I'll still be doing vinyl stuff. They make great records and shot glasses. But you should visit United Record Pressing. When you're there, you can get a t-shirt. You know, they've got great t-shirts. They've got fun mugs. I really thought I'd be drinking out of this the whole time, and instead I'm doing this weird, like, I've got my arm behind my back. People are gonna watch the video and go, he's got one arm. But yeah, it's a great place to visit. They do tours every Friday, I think at 11. And how did I do on time? I never looked at the clock. Am I late? Am I early? I don't know. And Scene. Okay. Any questions? Really? Okay, yes. You with the arm.
Is there anything that you haven't done as far as vinyl goes that you're like, man, if I could have done this, it would have been awesome? Like any weird techniques or, you know, like I know Jack White, you know, has like a lot of ideas where like he'll spin it from the inside out, he'll put the hidden track behind the paper, just anything that hasn't been done?
Not really. I mean, I'll answer that and elaborate on what you're talking about because it's another cool story. And we did do those. You know, we do pretty much everything Jack does except for the picture disc because we don't want those greasy sandwiches in our building. But the something that's Jack's idea that I think is amazing that I would love to see happen, that yeah, if there was something we haven't done that I'd like to see done is sort of the perpetual record, the record just that somehow creates a loop that it just plays infinitely. But the record he's mentioning, if any of you are unaware of it, it's what they call the Ultra LP, which is a really amazing thing to see. It's and I'm going to have some of these details backwards to which is the A side, which is the B side, but it doesn't matter. But one side plays regular, you know, front or you know outside to inside. The other side plays inside to outside, which confused a lot of people, and a lot of people were returning the records. One side has a dull finish as opposed to the regular shiny finish on the record. There's a part of the record, I think, is that they both have hidden grooves. I know there's, all three speeds are on there. Part is, I think, a song hidden under the label. So there's music played at 33 1/3, 45, and 78 on the record. There's one side that depending, or almost like the sports records we did, it has sort of two different grooves at the start. So you could hear an acoustic intro or an electric intro, and then it goes right into the same song. But then the thing it probably got the most press for is there's this guy, I wish I could recall his name, but who works at this light laboratory kind of thing where they just study light. This is bad for your eyes. But they cut into the lacquer, so it was cut by hand just once and then replicated. What looks, if you looked at the record, just kind of casually, it looked like in the what they call the dead wax, the space between the end of the song and the start of the label. It just looks like somebody scratched the hell out of it. But if you get it in the right light, when it's spinning, like almost like a flashlight works good on a spot of it, and at the right angle, it seriously looks like an angel twirling above the record. It's like a weird hologram effect thing that's pretty staggering and amazing. But so after doing that, unless we can figure out that perpetual record before I'm done next week, we're gonna try. Any more questions? Yes?
Did Cashew's blood have glitter?
That's an interesting question. No, but I'm gonna, without throwing one person under the bus, I'm gonna give you a joke that Wayne made without telling you which artist, because that would be rude. But he's like, and sorry if anybody gets queasy with this, but as he's pouring one in, one kind of had little lumps in it. And he's like, oh, huh, blank is so cheesy that they even have cheese in their blood, which was kind of amazing. But yeah, no glitter. Yes, John.
What's the minimum number of records you can press if you wanted to press your own record?
The minimum is currently 300. It was 100 for quite a while, but just with everything being so insane and so backed up, it had to be raised to 300. There's a chance when the new building opens, it'll go back down, though. Anyone else? Interesting. Was I that informative, or is it just kind of like that dude showed chicken? Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming. I'm glad all of you were still up. Thank you for coming.